Coming by. For the newcomers in the room, we are Houston Oasis. We are a alternative to faith-based community. We kind of put an emphasis on secularism and reason. Thank you for coming out on a Sunday morning. I know it's a kind of a problem for some people, but well worth it. I am one of your MCs today. We're going to have a rotating MC column today, but it really is a pleasure to introduce the speakers and to get this morning started. Today's topic, the main talk, is entitled Embracing Life's Fluidity. Through the ups and downs of life's experiences, we can learn to be open-minded for personal growth and change, which I love. But first, we're going to have a couple of speakers. Jacob Atchison and Rachel Sears will each present a short talk on navigating life's transitions. Quick introduction. In order, Rachel Sears is a member of the Houston Oasis community. In 2022, she received her PhD in rhetoric, pedagogy, and composition from the University of Houston. She is a curriculum writer in advanced placement, English literature, and language for Yes Prep Public Schools. Throughout her 20 years as an educator, Rachel has learned the necessity of remaining open to change. And Jacob Atchison is a member of the Houston Oasis board. He recently completed his master's in counseling and is accredited as a licensed professional counseling associate. Two awesome people going to give some short speeches, starting with Rachel. Let's give her a hand.
All right, even though I'm a professor technically of rhetoric, I had to write this out or I would talk too long. So I had the privilege of growing up overseas, and at 18 I returned to the States for college. I remember being excited to finally be on the path to becoming a teacher, something I'd wanted to be since I was 5. I soon realized, however, that I knew very little about the educational system here in America. I quickly learned that educational inequity plagued huge swaths of the country. I was heartbroken to discover in my year of student teaching that many of my kids could not read on grade level. In fact, many of them were 2 or 3 or more grades behind. My vision of being the next Robin Williams from Dead Poet Society vanished. So I had a choice to choose a different path or to meet the kids where they were. I chose to meet them where they were. Instead of reading great works of literature and engaging in robust discussions, we worked on fluency, vocabulary, and grammar. When I finally became a full-fledged certified teacher, I took my first teaching job at an international school in Istanbul, Turkey. It was a unique hybrid of British and American curriculums, and our primary audience were the children of foreign diplomats and businessmen and women. Nothing in my own educational experience up to that point had prepared me for this group of students. I was just coming from my very humbling student teaching experience and having accepted the realities of teaching in America. Well, these students in Istanbul on the whole were a grade or 2 or more above grade level. These 16 and 17-year-olds were more ready for college than I was, having already been to college. I learned very quickly that fluency, vocabulary, and my cute little lessons on characterization or setting or whatever would not suffice. Though I felt completely unprepared by my English education classes and student teaching experience, I looked to my experience as an English major for inspiration. How did my college professors run their classes? I scrapped my teacher-centered K-12 approach and had my students become the experts, which they kind of already were, taking on the role of teacher. I learned so much from them. After 6 years in Istanbul and being educated by those brilliant students, they had me thinking, I could get my master's, hell, maybe even my PhD. So I returned to the States, settling in Houston for grad school. I took a job in HISD at an alternative school. I only vaguely knew what that meant. I definitely had to change my thinking and my approach again. Here is where I internalized the saying popularized by teachers, especially during the pandemic, we must Maslow before we can bloom. Essentially, this maxim encapsulates the idea that if a student's physical needs are not met, educational goals become more difficult, if not impossible. At this high school, the average reading level for our student body was between 2nd and 3rd grade in high school. But if you consider the number of students that were homeless, single parents themselves, and in and out of juvenile detention, this makes sense. Maslow before Bloom. I knew I could not solve all the problems, but my approach became creating a safe environment with plenty of snacks. Then we might get to learning letter sounds, phonemes, decoding words, and fluency. Ultimately, I had to step away from the alternative school because it was not sustainable for me, but it primed me for my next evolution in my journey as an educator. At my next school, I learned about the transformative power of restorative practices in the classroom, in particular circles. I think my friend and mentor, Dr. Anita Vadba, will be coming later this summer to talk about restorative justice in more detail, so I won't dive into it here. Essentially, the focus of the classroom becomes on building a community, a safe space. When that space is created, deep learning can happen. I'm happy to say that even the most troubled teens can engage in those Dead Poet Society-style discussions about literature when their needs are met, if only for 90 minutes, in spaces where they feel safe. This practice has proved invaluable, particularly during the pandemic. My greatest teacher over the last 20 years of my educational career has been change itself. I like stability and consistency just as much as the next person, but I know that that is not where the magic happens. The magic happens when we open ourselves up to new possibilities, choosing change over stagnation. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you for your work, Rachel. Really, really good stuff. Now, Jacob's on his way up here to give his story.
Good morning. Y'all hear me okay? All right. I'm pretty loud, so that really shouldn't be an issue. So I wanted to thank Tim for suggesting this topic. It's a great one, embracing life's fluidity. I don't recall who the quote's attributed to, but the only constant is change. That's very true. I did not grow up in the Houston area. I grew up in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. Went to undergrad there and got my degree working, and then worked in education for a year. Then a change happened. Got a job offer in the Houston area. Came here. I was like, sure, why not? And needed some help with my own life transition of finding a group. And thankfully, to Houston's successful marketing team, shout out to them. I was able to find Houston Oasis, and I wanted to thank this community for embracing me and making me feel welcome. That was one big life transition. Another one happened in 2020 where I was asking myself if career-wise, working in education is what I wanted to do the rest of my life. The answer was no, and which was a little bit difficult because I was applying to grad school in education, but mercifully did not get accepted to that one. Came as a shock to me, but I was happy. Then I, like Will had mentioned, I got my master's degree in counseling. That was another transition, and I wanted to thank everyone in this community for being there for the life transition, because I think what can really help people through the life transition is to have a support system. Because it really is not easy going through life's transition, and life itself can be difficult. As I'm now in my own transition of preparing for a new career, I wanted to say that embracing life's fluidity is essential, and I'm really glad we're having a talk on it today. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel and Jacob. Excellent. David Oliverio started playing the piano in the worship services at his father's Pentecostal church at the age of 12. Later, he started a Christian band that performed in various churches and other gatherings. By the time he was 15, he was writing his own music, boogie blues, jazz, rock, classical, and more. By the age of 19, he was preaching in his father's church and speaking after performing at the piano in various churches and other venues. He assumed the multiple roles of youth pastor, music minister, and evangelist in his father's church at the age of 21. Later, in 1984 and 1987, he started 2 new churches, leading worship from behind a piano keyboard. 34 years ago, David left his faith and became a secular humanist. In 2014, he resumed public speaking and became involved in various forms of humanist activism. David was a personal fitness trainer from 2007 to 2022, now retired. On most Saturdays. You can find him in Herman Park talking to anybody who'll listen about a positive dialogue between religious and non-religious people, and if there's an interest, also inviting them to Houston Oasis. He's a model for us all, I think, in many ways, in his energy and activism and his real love for individual people. The topic today, give the credit to David, his idea, and his topic, the topic of this talk is embracing life's fluidity. David.
Thank you, Tim. All right, testing 1, 2, 3. Can y'all hear me? I had to make that rhyme. All right, good to see y'all today. So thank you so much, Rachel and Jacob, for your short talks. And that was so great. It's relevant to the topic. And I want to give a special thanks to Tim Sledge, my friend, our friend, for coming up with these new ideas of different formats and different type meetings we have, right? Not just being talked to, but getting in group discussions, sharing with one another, growing the community from within, because I think that's very, very important. Life's fluidity, subject to change. And I'm glad Tim's got my timer going right there, so I've got to keep an eye on that closely. There's a saying I've said for years, you may have heard it, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, right? Because life can be difficult at times. Change can be difficult at times. Now, I was in the grocery store a few weeks ago. Christine, my wife, goes to Central Market. I go to H-E-B. Get my stuff, she gets her stuff, right? I went into my local H-E-B looking for my beans and greens. If you know me, I'll tell everybody, eat your veggies. They're good for you. So I went looking for my canned beans, and I walked up to the aisle at H-E-B, Montrose H-E-B, if you know that one, and the beans were gone. I don't like change. So I saw a young man, a stalker, and I said, young man, what happened to the canned beans? He said, sir, paradigms, I understand. They're needed at times. He said, sir, they're down on aisle 10. I didn't like the change, even though that was so minimal. Now, I have a thing called my happy list. Some of us have these lists. I added a few things to my personal happy list. And when I apply them, they tend to work most of the time. Number one, you probably know these things. Number one, most things in life are going to change. Not everything's static. Most things in life, we've got to accept that. They change. And number two, don't expect perfection, which includes especially people, places, or things. Now, 1 year ago this month, my wife, Christine, and I, as most of you know, moved here to Houston from Austin, Texas. We prefer Houston over Austin. It doesn't mean Austin's bad. Our subjective opinion is we like Houston. But guess what? Houston is not perfect, right? I can't expect perfection anywhere. Now, through the years, I've known people who have claimed to be very progressive. You may know people like that. And also some people who claim to be very conservative, right? Let's talk about the difference here. Now, conservative simply means opposition to change or holding to existing views. Progressive means advancing and moving ahead based on new data and information. Now, through the years of my public talks, my previous YouTube channels in humanism, I've discussed what happened to me personally in 2018. My father, who was, of course, the pastor, raised my brother and I into the ways of the ministry many, many decades ago. Well, he publicly disowned me back in 2018 when he discovered my public speaking and activism back in 2014. Now, my father and I loved each other dearly, but he did disown me. And I write a lot of music, so for me, that healing process, I use my songs. And I wrote a song entitled Disowned. And he literally told me on the phone that day, "You are dead to me. You're no longer my son. I don't want anything to do with you. I hate everything you stand for, everything you believe." Now, he loved me. Hard to believe he did. And I loved him. He just couldn't see that you can love somebody even with a different opinion. He was unable to change and accept people like what we try to do, right? People are more important than beliefs. I love that. I try to live by that. I'm not perfect, but I try to live by it. Now, when my father disowned me, it hurt bad. I was a little bit reactionary. I wrote my song about it. We didn't talk for 2 years. I remember sitting in my car in South Austin. Christine and I lived off of William Cannon and Mopac, if you know the area, in South Austin, doing one of my little videos that I so often did for my little Preaching Humanist YouTube show. Anyway, and I had my epiphany. My epiphany was, I'm going to call my father. It's been 2 years since we've talked. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to be the one to call him and say, "You're my dad. Let's get over this. We do love each other," even though he couldn't accept people's differences. He was so conservative. So I called him. He answered the phone. Immediately, he had his stipulations all laid out. Now, he never apologized, never said he was wrong, but I knew my dad. He's just that type of person, unable to change or open up to new ideas. In fact, my brother and I, when we worked on staff with him in the 70s and 80s, before we went independently and did our own thing in the ministry, we used to argue with my father about change, about in the church. We were young guys in our 20s. My dad didn't want to be open to anything new, any new ideas about the community, about growth. Totally closed-minded. And that's why we kind of went our separate ways. But I'm glad I restored the relationship with my father. It made me feel really good. I felt like I did the right thing. Thankfully, I did that because within a year, both of my parents died of COVID-19 in 2021. Thankfully, I restored the relationship with my father. And they were 91 years old. I spoke at his memorial service at a Baptist church. It was a great experience. I think I told you that last talk. Anyway, now there's a word called life transformation. Everybody has a version of life transformation. All religions, whether it's theistic or humanistic, Buddhism has their version, life transformation, change. Taoism, Confucianism, secular humanism, Christianity, Islam. Life transformation results whenever anybody pays more attention to an idea, a philosophy, than they do to the details of life. In other words, you can change and transform your life and be open to a new idea or a philosophy, right? Now, those of you that were raised in church or whatever, religion, you remember in Christianity, it was the life transformation scripture, like Donald Trump would say, 2 Corinthians. You know, 2 Corinthians chapter 5, those of you remember that. If any man be in Christ, he's a new creation. Behold, all things become new. The C.S. Lewis butterfly, if you will. That's a bird. Sorry, not a butterfly. I had to do my bird call. I used to make my clients, as a personal trainer, laugh doing all these goofy, silly things. I'm trying to be serious. I'm usually very silly and goofy, but my wife said, "You should be serious today." So, life transformation for me now, as a secular humanist, the last 34 years, life transformation for me now is purely secular. And those of you here that are fellow secularists and humanists and agnostics and atheists, we have our version of change without anything supernatural, right? Now, from 1976 to 1989, as you know, I was a preacher. After I left my dad, I started my first church. I was hardcore literalist. The whole Bible, literalist. The second church I started, I was already flowing in that river of fluidity. I didn't know what was happening to me. I was already changing. I didn't even believe in evolution. I didn't know anything about change. I was already swimming in the current of life transformation and change. The second church I started in the mid-'80s, way back then, I already changed my theology. I couldn't believe in the concept of an eternal, torturous hell where the worm never dies and the fire is not quenched. And I thought that thing through. How can this be love? That's not love. Unconditional love is you just love and forgive, right? Even if you have a different opinion, like I did with my father, right? That's, to me, love. You just love. So the second church was more of a just liberal, progressive Christian type thing. You take the red letter stuff from the Jesus' teachings like our liberal and progressive Christian friends do today, which I like. They cherry pick. Thank you for cherry picking, I tell them. I always thank them. I don't argue with them, try to change their mind. I go, good for you. You're cherry picking. Keep cherry picking. Now, by 1990, I can no longer believe. That's a whole other story. I wrote a song on that too. My story. Tells you the whole story, what happened, how I lost my faith. A lot of us have those stories. We all have stories. That's why I love reading biographies. I'm reading Tim's book right now, his autobiography. Wonderful book. From 1990 to 2000, I call my learning to live in a God-free world. I didn't know anything about science philosophy. I was alone. I left the church. I had my whole friends were gone. My whole community was gone. It was just me, my first wife, and my two little babies in the 80s. I had to learn how to create myself and find meaning in life, purpose in life, values, ethics, morals, love, peace, and joy in a God-free world. I had no community, like Jacob was saying. He's thankful to have a place like this. I didn't have that in Waco, Texas. It was just me. It hurt. I was alone. I felt like a nihilist. I had to reprogram my whole thinking. And I thought of that scripture, which some of you remember, the prodigal son. You remember that parable? The son leaves the daddy, and he goes squanders his life in sin and misery, that type thing, right? Well, I may have rolled in a pig pen of nihilism and misery for a little bit. Didn't last long. I got up, wiped that mud off, looked back to the daddy, and realized I don't need a daddy anymore. I'm a grown-ass man. I don't need that. Now, a lot of people do go back. I didn't go back. Many of you don't go back. I didn't need it anymore. I outgrew it. I put aside childish things, right? And the rest is history. But I'm going to tell you that was a season of pain, loneliness, and near nihilism. But I'm glad I kept holding on and changing. Little did I know I was in that river, a fast-flowing river of fluidity and change. Didn't know anything about being open-minded, but I obviously was. 2000 to 2018, 18 years, that's a long time. I call that my religious traumatized years. Sound familiar? Some of you are in that stage. You're hurt, you've been wounded, you're traumatized by religion. I get it. I'm not mad at you. I'm not upset at you. I have deep sympathy and empathy for you. I get it. I've been there. I'm so glad you're here, and you have people that can love you and help you to get over that stage. I was in that religious traumatized, combative, I wanted to fight, and angry atheist stage. I thought to be an activist, you go out and you attack somebody else's belief system. You go out and remove faith from them. It didn't work. I was adding fuels to the fire of polarization. I've evolved into where I'm at now, which is called common ground humanism. Now, I noticed something. My internal moral compass at that combative years, where I thought it was all about arguing and debating and attacking other people's beliefs. I thought that would make me happy, but my internal moral compass was not rewarding me. It was flashing, high alert. It did make me feel good because I understood. I was learning about science and philosophy. I had to educate myself. I didn't know anything about it. I just started reading books and learning through experience. And I realized that this internal moral compass was rewarding me when I was loving and kind to people. And I accepted them and tried to live by this. But when I was hurtful to somebody else, it made me feel bad. That's our genes rewarding us to be kind and loving to others. Now, those 18 years were pretty tough. I had a reputation for being one of those type of atheists. Pivotal year was 2018. And people that knew me back then could say, wow, you're very different. 2018, 2 instances happened. Does that show I have 15 minutes left? Thank you. Okay. 2 major instances happened that changed my life forever. I was used to going out, like Tim said, and some of you gone out with me here in Houston. I probably embarrassed you by bringing you up to the Jehovah Witnesses, introducing myself, which I do all the time. Right? Ted, Richard, Will. You're like, oh, God, here goes David again. But different now. Now it's like, hey, we're fellow human beings. Okay, I'm getting off topic. Anyway, chasing rabbits, which we used to call, right? So I remember years of going out with signs, Georgetown, Texas, setting up tables, leading groups down to San Antonio, all over with signs. Atheist signs, secular humanism, good without God, getting people angry. I noticed that there were a lot of yelling matches. I'd get mad back. I thought that's what you do. My internal moral compass was always giving me a bad feeling. One particular day in 2018, Lady Bird Lake, Austin, Texas. If you know Austin well, under the Mopac Bridge, right across the street from the bathrooms. If you know me, oh gosh, there's David again going to the bathroom. I drink a lot of water. Retired personal trainer. I'm used to drinking water and my coffee, right? I remember one morning, I had my button-pushing signs out there, angering a lot of the conservative Christians. I was called every name in the book. Anyway, but I would yell back. And I never felt good about that. I was no better than them. I felt like a hypocrite. I remember turning my back, Lady Bird Lake Trail here, I remember turning my back on the passerbys. I put my sign down, and I was broken. Now, I always blame my Italian genes on this for being emotional. I can't even play a lot of my music. I just cry. I've written 3 songs about my wife. They're tear-jerkers about how our relationship. Anyway, let's just blame the Italian roots. How's that? Emotion. I turned my back on the passerbys. My shoulders were doing this. Now, I certainly wasn't with my clients doing dumbbell shrugs, right? And I certainly wasn't laughing. I was weeping. I turned this way, put my head down, and I told myself, I can't do this anymore. Something's wrong. I felt miserable and sad. I didn't feel good about this confrontation, this polarization, when we should be trying to change the world through love. And then after that, I left. The next week, I made some new signs. Right, Ted? You've helped me on the signs, right? For Oasis. And I made new signs. I just put humanism, the love of humanity. Something not so button-pushing. To love is human. And I went out there, I noticed a lot of the believers, rather than being angry, would come up to me and go, I disagree about the God stuff with you. I believe in God, but I like this thing of love. This is really good. Maybe we are all human. Maybe we can try to find common ground. And it made me happy. I had Christians come and hug me and thank me for being out there. And why was I happy? My internal moral compass was going, yay. Finally, hard-headed David's learning, you know. Now, 2 weeks after that was the 4th Saturday of every month. That's when I took a team from the atheist community of Austin down to San Antonio, Alamo. We would spread out, and I'd have all the people out there with their signs. The groups from San Antonio even met us there a couple times. Hector Garcia was out there one time. Anthony Magdabosco, you know Anthony? My paisan, Anthony Magdabosco was out there. And here I was the leader, kind of. I started all this. I'm the one out there yelling back at believers. I was a bad example. I felt bad. That day, even with my new signs, I had a couple of the evangelicals come up and really give it to me, the whole thing. I begged this couple. I said, please stop. No more hate, no more confrontation. I walked off, as I did a couple weeks ago in Austin, prior to this, sat on a curb. I was going to bring a chair up here and sit, but that's okay. I sat down on the curb at Alamo Plaza, if you know that area, by the Alamo, and of course, across the street from the visitor center where there's a bathroom. So I sat down the curb, put my sign down, put my head down. I was broken again. And my assistant, Ben, hey Ben, if you're watching, he still lives in Austin, young guy, brilliant, smart, all these new ideas. This is the kind of older guy I am, in my late 60s now. These young guys all have these new ideas. David, we need to change this, change this. Ben came up to me, and he goes, what's wrong, David? And I was already broken. You know, I just can't. I said, this is wrong. There's got to be a better way. And I said, I can't do this anymore, man. He goes, well, what are we going to do without you? I said, what do you mean, what are you going to do without me? We're all replaceable. You take it. Of course, he took it, made it even better. It was good. It's the kind of person I am. I always start things because I've got that type of personality. Just start this, turn it over to people that are more capable and can make it even better. But he went on and made that better. I changed. Now, tools of change for me during that time, leaving that stage of angry atheism, number one was my internal moral compass. I've already talked about that. Number two were my personal experiences, otherwise known as experiential intelligence. I don't have a college degree, but I learned a lot from reading and mainly being out of my bubble. I talked about that in my first talk here a year ago, last summer. Getting out of your bubble, find out we're all human. Those were my experiences that led me to where I'm at today. And the consequences, what we call in humanism a consequentialist, I said it right, ethical system based on the consequences, situational ethics, each situation we think things through, and so forth. Now, some of you may, oh my gosh, I'm behind time. Some of you may remember my wife, Christine. What happened to Christine? Where is she? What happened to her? Well, she's on a life experience journey as well. 3 months ago, she came to me. Sorry, I'm behind. I'm going to go really quick. She said, honey, I got to talk to you. She goes, I hope you don't get mad at me, but I can no longer come to Oasis. Don't take it personal. I can no longer, this secular humanist, atheist, non-believing world doesn't work for me. I got to go back. She went back to Christianity. She was raised Episcopalian. She needs more. Now, I had to make a choice. Here's my wife, the woman I love. We've been together 9 years. She's the love of my life. Boo-hoo-hoo-hoo. I got a couple songs about that, right? Who decided to go back. She needs it. I've realized some people, like she says, need to believe in something up there. And she even said, David, I know you and some of your friends. She mentioned some of you by name. Some people just don't need it. I need to have some kind of parental figure in the sky. It makes me feel good. Thankfully, her form of religion is very, very progressive. If you know Episcopalians, some of you here are married to Episcopalians. We talk about it. It has not affected my relationship with Christine at all. Because, again, right here, my love for my wife overrides our differences. Real quick, keys to change. You probably already know this. For me, number one, simply openness. Being open-minded, objective in your thinking. We don't know everything. There's a lot of things I don't know. There's a lot of gray out there. Living a life of reason over faith is a little more challenging. You got to think things through. It's not as easy. Faith was pretty easy for me. Here you have to think things through, and there's a lot of gray. There's a lot of uncertainties out there. So being open. Now, in fact, I was at an interfaith lunch meeting last month. Went up to North Houston, met with, in a home, 9 Christians. Oh, 9, I count right. 1 Muslim, 1 Hindu, and me, the crazy secular humanist guy from Oasis in there. We talked. You know what they were talking about? And they heard my story. And I told them about Oasis. They said, wow, that is cool. They didn't get upset. Now, these are progressive Christians. Will, you know what I'm talking about, right? The progressive Christians. Yeah, Will's back there doing this. He knows. A lot of us know. Richard, you know. So they were talking about open-mindedness. And one young man at the end of the table, young man in his 40s, said, we can learn from each other. All different religions or no religions. He leaned forward. I was at the end of the table. He pointed at me and goes, and even you, David, because I was new there. I can even learn from you. We're all the same journey. We want to become better people. We just have a different version. Some believe in the higher power. Those of us who don't believe in this, right, human. They were open. Number 2, keys to change for me is humility. I'm not talking about the humility some of us were raised in. Not the all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. We're born wretched, wicked, all that. I'm not talking about that. I'm a worm. To me, humility is understanding your strengths, abilities, and weaknesses. I do the few things I think I'm pretty decent at, I've been told. A lot of things I'm not good at. I have a lot of weaknesses I'm working on. And also admitting when we're wrong. People that never change, and I hate to say, I'll use my dad as an example. As much as I loved him, he couldn't change. He could never admit when he's wrong. True humility are confident people that use their strengths and abilities to benefit other people. We all have strengths and abilities here. I'd love to see more people being used and getting up here and doing what they do, their talents, whether it's music, speaking, anything. We want to see people in our own community come up and do it. Get involved and use your abilities and talent to benefit yourself and mainly for other people. We all have strengths and weaknesses. And number 3 for me, failing forward. We've heard that term. Now I could say, you could look at the scars on my elbows and my knees. Why is there a K in knees? The English language, isn't that crazy? My knees. Not literally, figuratively. Why? Believe me, I have fallen forward and made a lot of mistakes. But failing forward is good. You get up and you keep progressing and changing, being open and admitting when you're wrong. Now, I close with this, right on time, right on schedule. We can apply this life fluidity and change individually, which I've talked about. Not only individually, but group, community. Now, I'm not touching social evolution with a 10-foot pole. I'm not a scientist. We have scientists in this group. Very intelligent people, a lot smarter than me. I'll leave it up to y'all to debate whether there's such thing as social evolution or not. I just do. I don't know. I do my dumbbell shrugs. I don't know. But I can tell you this, that we can be open for change. Not just individually, but as a group. Always listening for new ideas. Being open, having some humility, and admitting where we're wrong. Listening to new, fresh ideas, and sometimes that comes from people that are younger, not always. And changing and flowing in that river of fluidity. Thank you very much. I did it within 30 minutes. Now I'm going to go drink some water. Thank you, Tim.
Thank you, David.
Did I thank you?
You did. Thank
Okay.
you. That was awesome.
I
Thank
started
you
chasing
so much.
rabbits. I forgot.
All right. Wonderful. Well, okay. Before we go to coffee break, you're going to have a chance to sit down in a small group and talk about change. We have group leaders. If you would stand and hold up your card, go to the spot in the room where your group will be. And in just a moment, what I'd like to ask everybody else to do, is this on? What I'd like to ask everybody else to do is pick a group. Grab your chair, take it to one of these group leaders holding up their card. Hold them up high, everybody. And then when you come back from coffee break, come back to your group. We'll have about 25 minutes to talk. You don't have to talk, you don't have to share, but you can just listen or talk. So find a group, coffee break, and we'll come back in 10 minutes. Thanks.
Tish, are you all headed to Galveston next week? Oh, nice. Very good. Good. Well, tell me about it when you get back, because I want to take my mother-in-law
See if
to
you
the
can spell
Strand
this one.
area. Oh, I got to get this thing off. Oh, my gosh. They're here at
All right, if you would, if you haven't already, find a group. I think we've got maybe a few seats right here. Look for a group that's maybe has a few extra seats, and we're ready to roll. So let's get started. Thank you.